Welcome to Lesson 10.
We're going to be covering some in-person game mechanics just to go over how it looks when everybody is picking and discarding tiles and how the walls get pushed out. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to start discarding because I am East. And so I am going to discard the first tile and say 6 crack. Now, there are no tiles for me to pick from that have been pushed out to the center of the table. So this player here needs to push their tiles out
To the center of the table at a 45-degree angle. And the reason that it is pushed out at a 45-degree angle is so that it makes it easier for everybody to reach the tiles. As the wall gets smaller when people are picking, it is courteous to keep the wall pushed up to the center of the table.
We pick to the right counterclockwise. We push our walls to the left. So the opening here from the break of the wall is here. And as a reminder, if you follow the break, you'll always know which wall is supposed to come out next. And that is if the player put their tiles where they belong, which is right where they came from. So now the next player, who's to my right, would pick and discard and name the tile East. And then we would do the same here. This player is going to pick and discard flower. This player here is going to pick and discard a south. And it goes around like that and continues until someone discards a tile that someone needs for exposure. And we're gonna, even though you saw that already, we're gonna go ahead and do an example of that right now. 6 dot, call. I take my 6 dot up, put it up with a joker, and there I have displayed a pung of 6 dots. And again, notice that I have hugged my joker with my tiles or nested the joker amongst the tiles.
I'd also like to suggest that you slide your exposures all the way to the left after completing the initial one, and then any additional exposures can follow with a separation. This is done so that you don't make it obvious and put the exposure in the exact place that it is shown on the card. After all, you don't want to make things easy for your opponents.
Now that I have put up my exposure, I will discard East. All right, I want to show you that one more time. So I'm going to reverse everything here. The player to my right picks a tile from the wall and discards a 6 dot. And I need that 6 dot, so I say call. First step, pick the tile up from the table. Be careful to pick up the right tile, because if you pick up the wrong tile, there's no reversing it, a very big mistake, which would make your hand go dead. So I'm going to verify it, taking the right tile, putting it up on my rack. I'm bringing up the other tiles that I need, and it is a pung that I needed for the hand that I'm working on, and I have now my exposure of my 6 dots. And if you will notice, the joker is nested between the tiles. And then I would proceed to finish and complete my hand by discarding a tile and naming it East. And the game then would continue to the right because when somebody calls a tile, the game always proceeds to the right. It never goes back to the player who discarded it. So let's actually do that. We're going to reverse this and do it again with another player throwing the 6 dot. Okay, well, let's say this player here picks a tile from the wall and discards a 6 dot. Now I say call, pick up the 6 dot and put the other tiles from my rack up. You'll notice I did again, that's the joker. And then I would discard a tile, red, to complete my turn. Now under normal circumstances, if it was just picking and there was no call, the next player to pick from the player that discarded that 6 dot would be the player to my left. But because I called the tile, the next player to pick will now be the player to my right. So once a call is made, the picking continues always to the right. So just think of it this way, you never go backwards. So unfortunately, when this happens, in this particular scenario, this player to my left missed a turn, and that's the way the game is played out. Is something else that I want to mention, which is very important. When you are playing the game, do not have any spaces among your tiles. And the reason you want to keep them together is because if you were to do this, something like that during the game, a smart player is going to know that you're waiting for something to fill in here, to fill in here, to fill in here, or possibly if you do this, that's a pretty good indication that these are your discards, which is a great indication that you are 3 tiles away from Mahjong. So you need to be very careful. It's sometimes difficult and challenging for a new player not to separate tiles to match the groupings on the card. But I promise you that it's easier to learn not to have spaces than it is to break the habit once you do it with spaces in it. Habits are much harder to break than learning something new. So please keep that in mind.
I also want to mention that when discarding tiles on the table, they are randomly placed. And it is always a good idea to place your tiles away from you and not directly in front of your rack. Placing them directly in front of your rack would give clues to the other players regarding what tiles you are not playing with.
This concludes lesson number 10, and I'll see you in the next lesson on ilovemahj.com, where we start playing a real game.